Hi, welcome to episode 34 of the podcast. We're in month 2 and already going strong. Today I'm going to talk about privilege, kind of privilege, how to use a privilege, and so on and so forth. It's just something I've thought about in the past and something that I just remembered recently, and I'm going to share my thoughts with you. So first, what is a privilege? Or what does it mean to be privileged? I think of privilege as anything at all, that gives you some form of advantage over someone else in any way, form, shape, or manner that might look like. So you might have heard of pretty privilege, white privilege, male privilege, and so on and so forth. But when I was in university, I realized a certain kind of privilege that I have. And there's so many kinds of privilege. Your privilege could be that your parents live together, or you live with your parents, or you have the support of your family, or whatever. It can be anything. It's not always like things that are material or tangible in that sense. It could be in the intangible things. Having people that love you, having people that you can rely on, having the feeling of being loved, having an innate sense of self-confidence. Privilege can look like many, many things. A couple of years ago, some student graduated from Covenant University with a 5.0 CGPA, and it was all over Twitter, and her LinkedIn profile was shared. She had done so many internships while she was in university, and people were talking about like having privilege, not having privilege. And Kemi Falodun said, sometimes it's privilege that makes you aware that some opportunities even exist, and that gives you the audacity to reach for them. And I felt like that was such a powerful thing, because really the access to information that you have is a privilege. Like, some people don't even have access to the internet, and you have access to the internet. That is a level of privilege that you have that other people do not have. The fact that you went to primary school or secondary school or even university or even went to grad school is a kind of privilege that other people may not have access to. And because you have privilege doesn't take away from whatever work or effort you have put in to leverage on that privilege. I don't think privilege is a bad thing. Some people frame it as a bad thing, but I don't think it is. I think it's just one more tool in your toolbox that you can leverage to get to where you want to go to. And the important thing is to be aware of the privilege. The problem happens when people are not aware of the privilege that they have, or as some people say, the luck that they have to be born in the right place, the right time, the right circumstances, and have access to things that other people may not have access to. And then they start to associate every good thing that they have, what they have achieved, just to their own skill and talent and being great, and not acknowledging the fact that there are other things that have contributed to that success, even things outside of their own control. Just like in the same way, there are things outside of your control that could happen that can limit your success. But the important thing is like acknowledge those things. It's partly you and partly your environment. So it's the two of them together. One of the clearest ways to see this is in academics, really. When you're in school, everybody thinks that, oh, you need to do, if you do A, B, C, D, E, you graduate to the first class. Like, there's a path, there's a clear defined way to get a first class. Get all A's, or be at the minimum B's, right? And then you will get a first class. But in life can life, and things can happen. A parent could die, your finances could take a hit, then you have to work, and then you're not sleeping well, and things are happening. Or you have a lecturer who has a personal vendetta against your life, and suddenly your grades are a mess, or they're not as great as they were before. And I don't want to say much, but I've seen that happen by personal experience, and my friends and people that I know have experienced that thing. Like, you're on a great path, and then just one lecturer that has decided to be a weapon fashioned against you, and because of that lecturer, I don't know, but yeah, there is all those kinds of things can derail the path you are on. So even if you have privileges in one way, something can happen and just like scatter everything for you. And this is not to say that you should not think about the control that you have, but to realize that there are a lot of things that are outside of your control, starting first of all with even your birth. You had no say in that. You had no say in where you were born, who you were born to, how you were born, all of those things. You had no say in it, but those things impact your life and can impact the trajectory of your life. I'm very well aware of some of the privileges that I have. I may not be aware of all of it, but I do know that there are some ways in which I'm more privileged than other people. And something that I never realized, it took me so long to realize how much of a privilege it was, is the fact that my father is a doctor. And I didn't realize how much this was a big deal until I was in university. I had never had issues accessing healthcare. Like, it was to the point where if I had a headache, I would just go upstairs. Because when I was younger, the place we lived in the compound, our house was on the ground floor and the clinic was on the top floor upstairs. And so I would literally just have to climb the stairs for any kind of health situation. It never occurred, like, in a part of my brain, I knew that people paid for healthcare, but it never really occurred. Like, I never really conceptualized it that you actually had to pay money in exchange to access healthcare, especially in Nigeria, where like healthcare is very difficult and expensive. So I didn't really think about it ever, about how people access healthcare. And there was this carefreeness I had because my dad is a doctor. He has his clinic, and the clinic was in the compound where I lived. And then when I was in my first year of university, is when I realized that, oh, people couldn't just walk into the hospital, complain about a headache, see a doctor, and get treatment. My roommate was sick, and I was like, go to the hospital. And she's like, I can't go to the hospital. I was like, why can't you go to the hospital? And she was like, I can't afford to go to the hospital. I was like, wow. I was so shocked in that moment. Like, this is a thing. And up until that point, when that happened, I had never had surgery. I had surgery a couple of years after emergency surgery. Again, very thankful for the privilege of having a medical doctor father because that could have gone very terribly. But I had never had to go to a government hospital for any kind of specialist care. I didn't have any threatening situations. So I was just like, for those reasons, like the Nigerian healthcare system was so abstract to me. Like I knew people had talked about it and all of these things, but I never really had any one-on-one interaction with it. And usually I think I'm an empathetic person and that I can put myself in other people's shoes. And being a UX student, that's like one of the things everybody talks about, like, oh, put yourself in the user's shoes. So like I was so ashamed of myself that it took that conversation for me to realize that wow, healthcare is not like this for everybody. And another encounter I had that made me realize how terrible Nigerian healthcare was and how bad healthcare was for most other people was when I had a very weird accident. I was going to fix my phone and I fell into a huge pothole and I was in school. And then a car was approaching as I fell into the pothole and it almost hit me, but it didn't hit me. And then he was like going to take me to the hospital. And so, because I didn't even know my leg was bleeding, I was bleeding all over the place. And he was like, oh, he'll take me to the hospital. And then I remember that Unilag has a hospital. And we went there and it was closed because they were on strike. I've been hearing that, oh, doctors are on strike, doctors are on strike. I had never experienced it. And then this is me bleeding profusely. And the one place where I should be able to get help is closed. So we're driving around the area looking for where I can go. We go to a pharmacy, and then the pharmacy directs us to a clinic nearby. And then I had to wait for like 10-20 minutes asking questions. Am I registered in the hospital? Do I have this? Do I have to buy a card? Oh my God, it was so stressful. And I had to register for a card, get the medication, get the tetanus shots, and everything then was about 7,000 naira. And at that time, I didn't have that money. And the person who drove me to the hospital thankfully paid for me. And I just thought about the fact that what if I was by myself or I was with just maybe my friend in school and both of us could not afford it? What would have happened? And I was just thinking about what if the car had driven over me? What if I had lost a lot of blood by the time we got to the University of Lagos? What if the wound was deeper? What if I developed an infection? I was just thinking of so many what ifs. And it was such a rude awakening for me of how terrible the Nigerian healthcare system is. And it also made me realize that really there's so many privileges we have in life that we often take for granted. We don't realize how much of a privilege it is until we're faced with an experience that makes us really see that we're living in a way that, even though it may not be the best way or the most ideal way, is better than what most people have access to. I remember after that encounter with my roommates when I was in my first year, I just made it a conscious effort. Like, if anyone I knew was sick, I would take them to my dad's clinic. Like, that was the little that I could do then. I would literally just take them to my dad's clinic and have them treated under the family file as my friend or something. And that was the one, like, my little that I could do then. And I'm not saying now that you should go and contribute to every single cause there is in this life, but the things that you really do care about, the things where you see that are things that have helped you, then do what you can. Like, I know how much education is important to me because the kind of school I went to for my primary school, I know the alternatives that could have been, but my mom fought hard to make sure that we went to a much better school that was a stretch for her to afford. And I can tell that so many of the things that I've been able to do was because of that great foundation that I had. And that is why education is so important to me. And I try to support wherever I can with people's education. And even if it's one person I can make a difference for, that matters. That one person matters. And what's the moral of the story? I don't know what the moral of the story is. You decide. But for me, I think that it's important for us to think about our lives and think about the ways in which we have things that other people don't. Yes, we can aspire for more. Yes, we can want to do better. But in the aspiration and in the striving and the ambitiousness, we shouldn't forget the things that we actually do have, the privileges that we have that other people are not even aware of the possibility of such things. There are things that you can never be aware of because you're not even exposed to that environment. And that's why like education is so important to me, because with education, you being exposed to things, it really opens your mind to see possibilities that you may not have seen before. And I think that in whatever way we can, we should try to see ways that we can contribute to make other people access some of the privileges that we have. I know that there are big systemic problems in the world and we can't solve all of the issues. But if we do what we can with the little that we have to impact, even if it's just one person, that makes a difference to that one person's life. And that one person can make a difference for another one person. And it continues to grow and grow and grow. And on that note, I'm going to ask you, if you care about education, there's an organization called Talent Mine that does great work providing free education to children in underserved areas. And all you need to do is sponsor a child through 6 years of primary education or 12 years of primary and secondary education. And I'm going to put the link to support them in the show notes. So that is one thing you can do today. Now, they didn't ask me to do this. I just decided to do it because I saw a post about it today. So please support if you can and share with other people if you can't. Bye. Thank you for joining me on today's episode of A Couple of Things. If you enjoyed this episode or found any part of it insightful, don't forget to share with your friends on your social media and be sure to leave a comment or a review if you can on your podcast listening app. Thank you.